this helps believe that the feminist movement must include transgender women to be considered true feminism. Now, I would like to invite the Prime Minister to open the debate.
In the liberal world of the 21st century society, we see that the variety of ideas is existing in our world because we are trying to move forward and we are trying to blend in and we are trying to push out the boundary between people and we are promoting equality in every sense. And so long these transgender people are struggling as a LGBT, a second-class woman, when they have already shown the clear incentive undergoing process of how they really want to be real as a woman, as the woman in the society. But we see that the society views them as a second-class woman, and that is a problem in today's debate because we see that the right of these transgender that needs to be upheld, that there needs to be freedom to uphold the certain idea that they are truly believe in and they really want to uphold is limited, and that's go against the idea of regular world that we are promoting. We see that when this society doesn't consider them as a female, we see that now that is why the government today is proposing that these transgender women should be considered as the true feminist movement. We see it does because our team stands that we believe that it doesn't matter what gender you are, but what we're talking about is the ideology of feminism itself. We see that these ideology is how people are being viewed and how they want to be viewed in the society. There need to be self-actualization and that idea and how they need to be recognized of what they want to be. And in today's debate, these transgender want to be viewed as a woman in the society. Today our program book I will be providing to you is on three levels. On the first one is how having these transgender women must be viewed as a true feminism, and secondly how transgender women will strengthen the idea of feminist movement, and thirdly the harm toward the transgender and feminism itself if transgender are being excluded from this feminist movement. But before I move on.
Okay. So are you saying that feminists only consider the real and consistent only if male are included, as in your case, right? Transgender is also male.
We see that what is this transgender is actually male that they are male because they can choose what they want to be, but the incentive and the motive that they are carrying is that they want to be a woman. That's why they even go under some circumstance of surgery to change into the woman completely so they can be real as a woman in society. And how is this related to the true feminism? I will be elaborated more in my argument. So now, today I have two arguments to give to you on firstly the ideologies of feminism and secondly of how including these transgender will actually strengthen the ideas of true feminism. So moving on to my first argument on the ideology of feminism. On the first one about the nature of ideology. What is an ideology? Many one might question that. We see that an ideology is an idea about something, a mindset, a principle that the people accept of the society, and it's how its impact and shape up the lives of people. And on the second level, what is feminism? And feminism is something that society wants to view women. Women have the same right equal to men, and how they need to be treated equal into the society. And that would lead to my third level on the exclusivity of the ideology of feminism. We see that this ideology is actually considered as an identity. It is what they want to be, not what they are now. We see that even though these people used to be men, but their motive and incentive of them that they want to be women, they already conceded to that identity. That is why the ideology of feminism is there, and that is the true feminist. We see that the true feminist is the identity. It's the belief that society set up, and and this gives the comfort to the transgender that they will be real as a true woman in society, not just a second-class woman as it is let us know. So now let me move on to my second touch point, second argument on how including these transgender will strengthen the idea of true feminism. On the first level, what is these feminism have been working towards so far is that they want to push the limit and break the glass ceilings of how women and men is not equal. I don't see the problem of letting these transgender in because when they're going there, they will have a certain perception that they want to break the glass ceiling that women and men is not equal into the society. So how by getting more people that have the same ideology to you who support your ideology and it will be more effective pushing it to inserting these ideas into society because there will be more people standing up for that certain idea. And on the second level, we see that it doesn't undermine the LGBT. How? Because how is this different and inclusive? Because we see that these gay people, in comparing in a case of gay, because what we say is that these gay people already show the entity that they want to be a woman, they want to be a woman in a male body. When there's already instinctive that it is justified for them if they want to be an LGBT. But what is exclusive of these transgender, as I have already stated to you, is that these transgender is a man undergo surgery and they have to go a lot of social pressure. They even have to go under social pressure from the environment to actually be accepted as a woman. When that's already proved that there's a strong incentive that they want to be a real woman, that's why they should be considered as, that's why they should be accepted and being able to uphold the idea of true feminism. So, because the government sides today are promoting to you, because their goal today that we want to promote a gender equality, we see that the true feminism must be exist. Because it's already, because how we will this today is that how we will this true feminism is that when true feminism is already already defined as an identity, they must accept everyone that concedes to that certain idea. That is why when these transgender actually want to be a woman and they are accept to that certain idea of the true feminist, that is why these transgender must and have to be included in these true ideas of feminism. And at the end of the day, it will drive these true feminism into another step and we are breaking the glass ceiling and bringing the real gender equality into the society. Thank you.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 30 seconds. We had the translation of the speech, and now I would like to invite the leader of opposition to open the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do not condone sexism. However, what we believe is that transgender movements should be their very own movements rather than having to rely on a certain sex to have them be recognized, right? And this is how they fail to define the word of true feminism, right? So now before I move on, I would like to take a few minutes to rebut the first speaker. Firstly, they provided us with a burden of proof. Firstly, they want to show us how must having a transgender actually strengthen the female and the feminism, right? But we see that, look, they haven't clearly explained to us how their ideals are exactly the same, right? Because they are their goals and their causes are actually quite separate. And I'm going to explain to you in this debate why that is and why transgender movements actually would be better off, please sit down, would be better off without feminism, right? And now secondly, they're trying to claim that these these transgenders would like to be in the same class as first-class women, right? But we see that that is quite, although that is quite true, we don't think that how having feminism be integrated into transgender is actually beneficial to them in any way. Because firstly, you have to understand that they appeal to different people and they actually detract from certain people. Different people dislike feminism and certain people dislike LGBT and transgenders, right? So thus, please sit down. We see that you are not only trying to bring these enemies, you are trying to strengthen the enemy group. We're thinking that you are better off having separate groups that appeal to that have different drawbacks, right? And lastly, they have failed to prove to us why they don't actually undermine the LGBT movements, right? Because all they're saying is that they want to be equal to women, but women wants to be equal to men. But the problem is, the transgender would like to steer clear away from being looked as a man in the first place, right? Thus, it is quite contradictory for a transgender to have to be required for a feminism to reach the status of true feminism, right? And this is where the biggest downfall occurs. Their idea is that the true feminism is an ideology, right? And that it can only be achieved if a transgender is located in a feminism movement, right? So we think that that is unjustified. So now, before I move on to my arguments, do you have any POI?
If you think that the idea of transgender woman is different from the real woman, then prove to me why this transgender trying so hard to become and recognized as a real woman in society, not just a second-class woman.
Okay, that brings me to my arguments. But before I answer your POI, I would like to talk about a few harms that will be included under their paradigm. Firstly, transgenders have different problems of their own, and this will be sort of what my second speaker will be talking about, right? Because as you can see, the religions such as Christianity dislikes LGBT, right? And you are trying to appeal to you are trying to have these people dislike feminism as well, which is highly harmful to the feminism cause, right? But now moreover, they also have different purposes, and they're essentially oil and water. And I'll be explaining to you why this is true in my arguments. So now firstly, why feminism and transgender cause is different and how they're essentially oil and water. The feminism movement isn't about fighting to be recognized as a true, fully fledged woman. They want to be recognized as a truly, as someone of equal to men, right? And as you can see, they require for women to have equal opportunities as men, equal payments in employment areas. They require men to not look at them differently, and they want to see them as men as well, right? Because that is essentially, that is essentially how females see themselves in the feminism movements, right? And whereas transgenders desire to be recognized, to become women, and however, they want to be steered clear away from the outlook or perspective of them being looked on as men, right? So we see that if the feminism movement wants to be looked as men, we don't see why transgender, who wants to be looked as women, should be included in feminism. Like, since they haven't proven this idea, we see that they fail in this cause. Yes?
Why would these transgender undergo surgery when if they want to be viewed as a man in the first place?
I'm not saying that they don't want to become women. I'm saying that they don't want to become men. But feminism wants to become essentially equal to men. Thus, it is not true for, we see the idea of them going for not circumcision, but going for cutting off that is actually relevant in this debate, right? So now, let's sit down. So what I've been telling you today is that transgender would like to be equal to men. However, they do not want to be equal to, they don't want to be looked on as men any longer. So now more importantly, not only are both causes kind of superficial to be together, right? Because as you can see, they have different causes. Women wants to become men, and men and transgender wants to become women. Thus, their causes are different. You might as well include transgender in the African American movement as well, right? Because those movements are separate as well, but wouldn't that kind of consolidate their powers as well? Wouldn't you allow those sort of excuses to happen under your paradigm as well? And moreover, we think that you are actually trying to bring up harmful effects to both the feminism movements and to the transgender movements, right? How? Firstly, you have religious groups that dislike LGBT transgenders, and then you have males that dislike feminism. You are having these males dislike the LGBT group, and then you're having this religious group disliking the feminism group as well. So we see that that is highly harmful to the feminism movement, right? So firstly, we have proven to you why there's no benefit to having these people be must having a transgender to be considered as true feminism, right? And moreover, it actually symbolizes that in order for a feminism to become equal to men, they need a man who wants to become a woman in order to become a true feminism, right? So we see that since they have failed to define what true feminism is, they have failed in today's debate, and they have failed to provide us a reason for why they should be included together.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Thank the leader of opposition for his speech. And now I would like to invite the deputy prime minister to defend their speech.
shouldn't be limited to female only. Opposition side tell us and ran a hotline case by telling through the first POI that at the end of the day, these transgender was different class. These transgender was still at the end of the day viewed as men, therefore they don't need to fight for the right that they want to be equal to men. But here's a distinction. These kind of transgender want to be viewed as a woman, because even if they're transgender, they do not deserve an equal right as men, because they're already viewed as a society that they're different from any other. But here's the identity that these transgender want to be, so they want to become a real woman. And under this kind of view, they also want to fight for the equal rights, because if the society eventually view them as a real woman, because of feminism needs to still exist in society, because women and real women would still fight for their rights, therefore these transgender would completely need to be improved. But before that, before the positive substantial, let me deal with some rebuttal. We say it's not about gender. We say that this true feminism is about identity, not the physically look or the female or gender you were born with, but it's some kind of identity that you are a real woman within inside you, no matter what you look like. But these transgender prove it to us that they do not just want an LGBT recognition, but they want something more because they want to view as a real woman, not as transgender. This kind of opposition tell us that there's a distinction between transgender and woman, but propositions say no. First of all, while it's claimed us that we undermine the rights of LGBT, we say we do not, because these kind of LGBT rights and feminism rights are something very different. LGBT needs recognition, feminism fights for equal right. With the LGBT, we do not undermine it. Why so? Because it is transgender. We do not need to recognize just LGBT anymore. As a society already moving forward, we think it's already a time for us to recognize these transgender even more. Because they're already proven to us and has grown in society that they are willing to go surgery and alter themselves physically and mentally, that they do not want just to be considered as another gender, but what they want is to consider as a feminism. And they want to fight for the equal rights as a woman to equal to men. Because even if they're transgender, they do not have the equal right to men. That's why they're already an incentive for these transgender to view as a real woman and fight as feminism. Second rebuttal on how they talk that feminism ideas and rights, and though even if they want to view as women, they still need to fight for the right of feminism. That's why we're still supporting feminism in today's debate. But opposition side here saying us that at the end of the day, these cannot be viewed as the same gender. It is something that we think is so discriminated against LGBT and feminism. Last rebuttal on the idea they say that there's no benefit of doing so. We're saying it's not completely true. And I'll prove to you further in my own argument of why exactly is beneficial to LGBT and feminism movement as a whole. And they question us, us to tell them what is the definition of true feminism. We say the definition of true feminism is how you define yourself. It doesn't matter what gender you are, but the identity of female has to be there. And this transgender, or you fulfill that role in terms of becoming a real woman and ready to fight with the woman for the equal rights to men, and ready to fight with the feminism movement, and already needs to more recognition that they do not just want to be a second-class woman, but they want to become a real woman. And this kind of problem is something that opposition do not deny, but they do not give us a real solution to solve and reach the goal. But before moving on to argument, point of information.
The problem is that the society still hasn't recognized LGBT group as women yet. So the society isn't moving forward in the status quo. So how do you fulfill your role?
That's exactly why we need to fulfill the role. Because society do not think that transgender are women and needs to be recognized. That's why we need to explicitly include this kind of transgender in the feminism in order to tell the society that their identity of these transgender are not just transgender, but they are women and they're willing to fight for women in order to deserve the same right as men, in order to drive the feminism forward. And this proves to us that identity of women still needs to be recognized in transgender too. That is why the problem exists and we solved it. But before, so let's move on to the arguments today. My first argument is about the harms towards feminism if transgender is excluded. First level, talking about the identity, that why it's important. My first speaker told you that there is true feminism is some identity that needs to be recognized. Reason is important because it needs to be viewed as who they are, not how they look or what gender they're born with. And this transgender has this woman identity. They're physically and mentally transferred to become this real woman. And the world today, we see, is free enough to accept that. Even if the LGBT rights and feminism rights are not yet successful, but we didn't, when we included this kind of idea, tell people that their identity is the most important thing in feminism movement. They will drive forward the feminism movement and LGBT together. Within this kind of idea, we even flourish the idea of upholding feminism and identity of women that needs to be recognized even if there's transgender. But if not, right, the worst case scenario of their side is this. People will start to question whether feminism movement are considered as female only or identity or a woman. Proposition needs to push that, well, people do not need to question because the feminism movement as a whole is ideology and identity of people that are real women. But on the opposition side, people will still need to question, then what's the difference about transgender and a real woman? Therefore, the problem of second woman class will still exist. Therefore, LGBT will never be recognized as a real woman. They can never get the right of the society viewing them as a real woman that want to fight for feminism too. Second argument on the idea of how transgender movement on their own is not enough, which is the opposition side proposal. Here's the thing, because society already see that these transgender are different, therefore they need to have their own movement. We don't think that's going to work, because at the end of the day, even if you create another movement, people are not going to recognize transgender as a real woman, and they do not solve the problem that we propose. So if the opposition side want to achieve feminism and LGBT goal, they need to come up with a new solution of why doing so. Just because of this reason, we prove to you why transgender women are women that need to fight for feminism too, and this is a further idea that will go together. That's why we're proud to propose.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 33 seconds. We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for the speech, and now I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to defend their case.
we are not saying that feminism only need to be only female. We on the opposition side, we see that with females can also create true feminism. We not see necessarily reason why do we need male in feminism, but we also allow male to be in feminism. So that's why we on our side stand for. We see that female can make their own true feminism without male. So we see that centuries ago there were slavery and women's rights or feminist movement. They first thought that they have the same goal, was to promote equality. However, as the time passed, they realized that they both have different purpose, which is reached by different process. Therefore, at the end, they split back into two different movements. And we can see that the improvement of this movement has shown up in society, while on the government side has no example on how these two movements joined together and will success at the end of the day, which we can conclude that the government failed to prove that this joint movement will success at the end of the day. And before I move on to my arguments, please allow me to oppose the government side. So, firstly, on the point of identity, they said that it is depend on people. If they want to be women inside, they can be women. We see that they have different purpose. As my first speaker, I told you that transgender, the purpose of transgender is to have rights in society, to have right to stand in society, not to have equal rights as male. We see that this transgender already have equal rights as male because they were male before, but they choose to be female. And right now, they need rights to be able to stand in society. They said that transgender want to fight for rights. And as I said, yes, we agree that they need to fight for rights, but their right is different from this female. The rights is the right to be in society, the right to participate in activity in society, the right to be accepted by other people, not the right to be equal as men. And we see that, however, we see that even though they need the rights to be equal as men because they are female, we see that the first rights and the most rights that we should prioritize is the rights for them to be in society. And we have no response coming up from the government side about the point of religion. We see that, as my first speaker have told you, that these groups of people can stand in society because of religion's problem. And however, we see that the feminism, the female can stand in society because of stereotype. We see that the female is stereotyped as weaker people, weaker groups of people in society. Therefore, they shouldn't have the equal rights as male, which we see that it's not true, right? It is a stereotype which should be gone from our society. And before I move on, yes.
And how is a religion view is not mutually exclusive to your side, because under society, when you fight for LGBT rights, those kind of problems will still exist under your side.
Okay. We see that as we can see. Right now, we also have people who try to stand in society. We can see United States, developed country, big country in the world. We see that some states allow gay marriage to happen. We see that movement actually goes in society. We see no necessary reasons to put these two movements together to be even bigger and to create even more harm, which I will prove in my argument now. So, my argument is about further harm coming up from the government side when you put transgender and female together. We are not saying that they can't be together, but we are saying that female itself can create true feminism. We don't need male to help us. We ourselves can stand by our feet. We don't need others to push us. So on the first level, we see that this process can succeed. As our team has stand here to say that they have different goals, they also have different principles. And as I give you an example, we see that this movement doesn't work. And second level, we see that the governments are now invading rights of this movement. We see that this movement is independent. No, thank you, ma'am. We see that this movement is independent movement. We see no duty of the government to invade these rights of independent groups. We see that the government itself are not helping this group at all and even create more harm within that group. They try to tell this feminism group to do things. We see that that is not the job of the government. We see that the government itself needs to support this feminism to reach their goal, not just telling them what to do and not helping them. And on my third level, the harm to transgender. No, thank you. First, we see that this will undermine people that transgender women can create the movement by themselves. They can create their own organization. They can create their own community. And at the end of the day, they need to follow the footsteps of women. At the end of the day, we see that they can stand by themselves. And this will send the message to the society that they are weaker. They are weaker than women, so that means they can't stand in this society ever. On my fourth level, the harm to female, no thank you, sir. We see that the harm to female is that we see that this will slow the process of feminism. We see that the process of feminism is to make female equal rights to male, right? But when you put transgender women within female, you need to reach two goals. Now is the hard thing, right? If you need to do two things at the same time, it's going to take even longer. So that creates even further harm. Even more so, we see that this can create conflict within this movement and even slow down the movement. Because we see that not every female actually accepts transgender women, right? And if you put this transgender woman with female, we see that that can create conflict within that even more. And on my last level, about effect to the people in society, we see that this can even create social backlash. Because on the first level, we can see that right now, the feminism movement is not success yet because there is a group of people who go against it, right? However, if you put even more transgender into this group, there will be even more people who go against this movement. As we can see that, there will be groups of people who go against feminism, and there will be people who go against transgender, and this will make the process even harder. So what have I proved to you today, and my first speaker has proved to you today, is that the feminism has different goals from transgender, right? Feminism, they want to be equal as men. And the process is that they want to drive themselves to be capable of doing things as same as men. However, on transgender, they already be able to do the same thing as men. They just need place in society, and we as the government to support them to create their own movement to be able to stand in the society. So that's we see that we have already fulfilled the government role. Thank you.
The speakers spoke for 7 minutes and 24 seconds. We thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for the speech, and now I would like to invite the government lead to conclude the government speech.
Opposite side. They only say that these genders, transgender and feminist, should not be moved, should not be merged together. They should not be equal. We say first of all this kind of senses. We don't agree with that. And the opposite side only contradicts themselves. Why they claim that our idea contradicts the idea of religion. The VPOI is not mutually exclusive. The haters under that case can happen too. However, they need to reach the point by saying that the US already legalized gay marriage because they accept that there is an equality between gender. So it means they're contradicting to themselves where they say that these genders is not equal, but they point out an example of equality. We say on this point they already destroyed the whole case. But before we go on to my flashpoint today, I have one argument against the previous speaker. The previous speaker question about the brought up the idea about this idea of of letting transgender to join feminist movement will aggravate the movement itself. First level of analysis, I don't know what's normal. No, I don't know what's the point of bringing up the government in this case. Because first, this case is about the principle. We are talking about principle, not about practicality. There's no government to intertwine in this case. And second, you are saying what you say it means you want these people to be alone, to stand alone in society. This will only harm these people themselves. Why? Because in order to be accepted, you need acceptance of the society as a whole. But if you want it to stand alone, it means you're saying that there's no need for other people to accept. That's acceptance. That's not enough. Right? And the third level of analysis, the problems are the options I say that women go against them. So the outside answer is that this is why we have to make this transgender be perceived as equal to women. And when we allow this transgender to become true feminism, it means send message to other people that they are equal. Since they are equal, other women in the end will accept. For example, this in the organization. For example, in many countries, they accept the rights of women. For example, in the U.S., before there is the universal suffrage, before there is a universal suffrage, they need the acceptance of other people before they allow women to have the right to vote as well. So that's why we think this is a problem that we have to take an action before we solve it. And third level, even if this will aggravate the movement, we still think that by not letting them, we still think that under our case, it will better, and we'll prove to you why it's still better in order to achieve the goal of feminist movement in my flashpoint. But no, ma'am. So let's move on to my flashpoint today. I have to make flashpoint to present to you when I speak. First, should transgender be viewed as true feminism? And second, which sides achieve the ultimate goal of feminism and LGBT movement? First flashpoint. Should transgender be viewed as true feminism? First level of analysis about the idea of fidelity, which brought up by my vegan, and they not actually tackle us that much. They only tagline, they say that this feminism idea should be grasped by some group, only certain groups of people. The first level of analysis against this idea is that first we say that upholding and grasping is not the same thing. By grasping, it means you understand these people, but by upholding, it means you become that people. We say that everyone can actually grasp any idea, any ideology they want to be, and that will be beneficial. Why? Because since everyone can, no ma'am, if everyone can grasp the idea of an ideology of the feminist movement, it means you understand feminist movement more. You understand why feminists want equality, or why these transgenders want equality. So we said if these transgenders, where we already proved to you they are equal as women, want to uphold this idea, it's good for the feminist movement or the ideology of feminist movement itself. And thirdly, and even if there should only be women who uphold feminist movement, we say this we only underline we say that one thing the feminists want other people to understand. And if you want to understand for other people, it means that there must be other people to understand you. And if you say that you want the only group to understand, when you're closing the door from the acceptance of the society as a whole, we say that's not the way that we want to achieve. And second level of analysis about the transgender, no thank you, ma'am. The problem is I say that transgenders want to be like women, and women wants to become like them. But first level of analysis, if they really want to be like men, then we propose to them that they should go to the surgery to become like men. But they are not. Why? Because they actually want. They want equality. They want something that as equal as men. For example, certain rights or breaking the glass ceiling. That's actually what they want, which the often seem not to understand on this point. And second, they told you that they are like women. They told you that they are like women. They alter themselves mentally and physically, so they should be equal in the liberal society where we accept the rights of people, which on this point left untackled by the opposition side. And third, we say this will strengthen the feminist movement itself, especially we say feminist movement needs a lot of supporters. And since we have more women into that kind of movement, it means they will have more power, more rights of bargaining for those feminist movement. It will be easier for them to argue for the rights of themselves. So that's why we argue that it's better to have the transgender. And the third level of analysis about the strength of enemy of the feminism. But the problem is I say that feminists have its own enemy, and also transgender has its own enemy too. When they merge together, there will be much more hatred. The first level of analysis, we say that there are the bridge to achieve the goal of the feminist movement. And I will prove to you in the second flash. And second, there will be sympathizers against these haters. And because these people will see that there are haters, and they will think that they must protect these people. And thirdly, there will be more haters. We are okay with that because we accept any idea of people in society. And second level of second class one, which sides achieve the ultimate goal of feminist movement and LGBT movement. First thing about the goal of this movement, the ultimate goal of this movement is to achieve the gender equality. But the opposite side say that gender should not be considered as women because they are totally different. First of all, we prove to you they are not different. And second of all, by letting them join, this will make transgender look feel down because they don't think that are women, they are like just only second class women. They will lose their pride as a transgender. We don't accept and when they lose their pride because we don't want people to be resent what they actually are. So for all these reasons, we very proud to propose.
The speakers spoke for 7 minutes and 25 seconds. Let the government leave for his speech, and now I would like to invite the opposition to control the opposition case.
In today's debate, in order for the government side to win this debate, they have to prove to us why it is justified to include transgender in feminism movement and why there is a dire need for that. There are only two responses from that, which is we see that it is a problem-solution mismatch. Firstly, they say that there are those people share the same goal of wanting to break the glass ceiling. And secondly, they say that transgender are mentally and physically same as women, so they should join feminism movement. Which we see that this reason is not enough for the government to actually interfere with the right of this independent group of feminism to force them to accept these people in the group to be considered as the true feminism. We see that this is not fair, and we also say that to join them together is impossible. And even if impossible, it creates more harm in the future, which I elaborate more in my class point. And also, we see that in today's debate, the government are saying that the true feminism can only reach it when there are transgender women included. As a woman, if we all put together and begin the feminist movement, we can see that our movement. Are you saying that our movement won't consider as a feminist movement? It's not fair at all. Even though they say that they try to promote equality in the societies, like putting transgender and women together, but we see that they are actually ignore the female. They are saying that if only female put together to form a feminism group, they won't accept and won't call it true feminism, which we see that this is not promote equality in the society at all. And also we see, okay, let's move on to my first point about which side create more harm in this debate. We see problem-solution mismatch coming up from this side because they have the idea of they should work together because the problem is they both want to break the glass ceiling in the societies. So they come up with a solution that let's join them together and the problem will be disappear. But we say no, you can't deal with two different problems at the same time. Basically when you have two different problems to deal with, are you going to separate them and like
can make it a bigger problem to have like slower movement and even more harder to deal with those haters from both groups, right? This is a problem solution which is not coming from their side. And also we see that in today's debate, the government side are living in imaginary world where the female or feminist movement will imaginally accept these people to be in their own communities and more than happy to receive the more burden from the transgender issue to be their own problem too. They're assuming that these female will be happy to like cope with another problem from outsider people like the transgender group in the society. But we see that this is not actually happen in the real world. So let's move on to our idea in this debate again. We say that our idea is first, we see that women feminism and transgender movement should be separate because there are two different problems. They have different goals and different mechanisms. Secondly, we see that the government have no right to interfere and tell the feminists what to do. As we see that the feminist is an independent group that have their own concept, their own beliefs, their own policies. The government have the right to interfere who they want to put in their own group, right? So why? Why we see that they should be separate? Firstly, because we see the problem and harm under their case if the feminist and transgender work together. First, on the principle level, we see that it will create conflict between transgender and female because the feminism movement won't understand why the government have to force them to actually accept these people into their group and create more problems for them to deal with. And we see that feminism is an independent group that have their own policy, their own beliefs, their own set of rules, and they join voluntarily by people that are having the same idea of feminism. But now the government are forcing them to accept transgender people to be in their group to actually deal with more problems. And secondly, we see that they shouldn't work together because it will be even harder to achieve their goals. Feminists have their goals because they want the same equal rights as men in the societies. But transgender, they want to be accepted as a gender in the societies. They're not like it's this different kind of goal. And we see that different goals, different mechanisms, group join together, it will create more messy things. And we also see that these actually share the same concept as the science student and the sports student. Science student want to work harder if they want to. Okay, these two people have the same goal of achieving the good grade. But the science student have to work harder, to study harder, read about chemistry to achieve their goal. But the science sports student want to good grade. They have to practice. We see that they share, even though they share the same goal, they have a different method. So they can work together because it will create more problems. And we also see that it will create more problems in the society. And even if they can work together, the female will accept these people into their group, and there basically no protest against this new group of people. We see that it is impossible for them to join together because we see that in order for some group to join together and become successful, they need to have first same ideal, same goal, and second they need to have same method towards their goal, right? But we see that this is actually failed at the first phase because firstly they don't have the same goal. Feminist movement have the goal of wanting the equal right in the societies. They don't want the stereotype of women working at home and male going to work anymore. But transgender want their own social standing. They want to accept from other people who they are, and they not want other people to tell them that they are having a mental illness in the societies. But we see that they have different goals in the society, so they can work together. And we see that actually these two groups have different problems that they have to deal with. Feminists have to deal with people that see them as a weaker gender in workplace or in education. But transgender, they have to deal with haters that look at them as mental illness and the religious group, which is untackled from their side. Even though it's not mutually exclusive, because our side can also religious group attacking the transgender group. But we see that when you join them together, this new group will have religious group and the male group attack this group at the same time, and it creates more problems in the societies. So their method is failed to achieve both goals from the feminist group and the transgender group also. And we see that joining them together is creating more harm in society. So please go to the side of the
And now I would like to invite the opposition in particular to proceed opposition case.
So ladies and gentlemen, what the government side has to prove today is that a feminist group consisting of only women cannot succeed on their own. And this is what they have been saying through every speakers of this debate, right? So we see that that is a fundamental flaw in their whole conviction. Just because the feminism group, without any transgender, but each having their own conviction, is not able to achieve true feminism. So is this the message you are trying to convey to the citizens, right? So we see that not only is this sort of backtracking, we see that you are harming feminism as a whole, right? So today, I'll be proving to you 3 things. Why? Firstly, they have failed to tell us that exact thing, that feminism group consisting of only women will not be able to succeed. Secondly, why transgender group will be accepted in the feminism group, and that the transgender group can be integrated into the feminism group. And lastly, why the society is ready to accept feminism. But firstly, I would like to point out a contradiction. The first speaker on their side said that the world today, quote unquote, is ready to accept it. It refers to the transgender, right? But the third speaker came here and conceded that there are still religious people that still goes against the LGBT. So is the world truly ready to move forward, right? So this brings me nicely to my next issue, right? Is the world ready for this? We say no, because firstly, there are problems still within the feminism group and the transgender group, right? Because these religious people still dislike transgenders, but certain males still feel like females don't have the same right as males. Therefore, if these problems still exist, you are dragging the whole team down with your own separate problems, right? So now this brings me to their most fundamental flaw. Is transgender going to benefit in any way from being included in the feminism group? We say no. Firstly, why? Because look, you are conveying a message that these feminism group has to latch itself onto these transgender group has to latch itself onto the feminism group in order to succeed. We say that this is extremely problematic because you are not solving the problem, and that these transgender will not be believed in, will not be able to integrate into society at the end of the day under their paradigm, right? And moreover, my second speaker has been talking about the idea that, look, like centuries ago, the groups were sort of a team. However, their problems are separate, right? Therefore, they felt like, look, we're only going to drag each other down. Let's just carry our own burdens and not have the team, not achieve its goal. So we see that what you're essentially doing is doing exactly this. You are allowing the exploitation. You are allowing the burdens to fill up for this team, thus resulting in the whole conviction not being conveyed and the solution not being fixed at the end of the day. So what have I proven today, right? So how can you uphold 2 laws at the same time that aren't even successful yet? So same goes for these movements. Transgender and feminism movements are not successful yet. Thus, they have their own problems. How do you expect them to act as a team if they still have these burdens to carry out? But lastly, let me point out that they have yet to justify why these these women with conviction to persuade that they do have the same right as men, that these feminism group without any transgender in it will be able to succeed, right? We say that they are able to succeed without the need of transgender being in the group, because the status quo states that anyone can be inside feminism and are not restricted to the status quo. However, we don't think that LGBT should be forced into the feminism group.
The speakers spoke for 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Thank the opposition Lead speakers for his speech. And now I would like to invite the government Lead speakers to close the debate.
Opposition side keep claiming we're only exaggerating problems. But here's the thing. We propose problem, we propose solution. They claim that it's a problem-solution mismatch without telling us then where is other alternatives. Because the status quo is failing in recognizing this transgender. So even if you go with under their side, there's not going to be any positive outcome that's going to be better for the status quo anyway. And we say, even if it's hard under our side to uphold and move two ideas together, the question is, should we still do it? Proposition side more than happy to drive these two policies together, even if it's hard. But before that, there are new materials coming from the whip speaker and the reply speech. I'm going to deal with that anyway. Before moving to the new materials, we say we're going to make this clear. Transgender and feminism has the same goal. Why? Transgender, you first use LGBT rights in order to be recognized as women. Later on, these transgender are special because they want to become a real woman, not just recognized as LGBT. That's why there has an incentive to join feminism and becoming real women. And that's the goal of these transgender. They do not just use the LGBT right, but they want to exert that feminism right too, because they do have incentive to do so. That's why at the end of the day, transgender and LGBT movement has the same goal. So new matters. They say that these two movements will be problematic because there is too much burden and problem solution mismatch and all that. We said that transgender will not drag feminism down. They do not have too much burden that is contradicting. We don't think so, and we think that that's kind of mean characterization to say that transgender would at the end of the day were just a male that wants to become female and will never be, and somehow it will drag the movement down. We think that characterization is very mean. We think that because of this problem, it's time for society to accept this kind of transgender more. Even if there's social backlash, we still think this we should do, because it does make no difference on what happened in the status quo. We question them. The reason is not mutually exclusive. They do accept that the USA legalized gay marriage. At the same time, they question us that social society will not accept. So there's some kind of confusion that coming from opposition side is still left unclear. So here's a two worlds that happening in debate. Proposition side tell you the goal of transgender is still just about LGBT. We tell you that the incentive for this transgender to fight with women. One, we tell you that even when they're considered as transgender, they don't have right equal to anyone, not just specific for male. That's why transgender are willing to fight with male. Second, another incentive is this. Because they need to fight for women, to prove that they are real women too, to prove that their identity are just as women. And we think that women are willingly to embrace it. Why? Because the more you have power in identity of women, the more feminism movement can thrive even better. That's why feminism movement and people and real women would be willing to embrace and more than happy to have this transgender to fight with that. Opposition side told you that they're so discriminating by saying at the end that this transgender are just male that wanting to join female fight and will drag them down. Those are the points that really discriminate and will not going to solve any kind of problem. There's still points that are left untackled. They tell us they in order to win the debate, they need to tell us that in order for the society to achieve feminism, is identity of women are just enough, or it's not their lifestyle. Second, they never told us that harm of not including is that people. We tell you that harm of not including is that people won't understand whether it's identity or whether it's just